Hello everyone and welcome to the ETHRWorld and Great Learning Roundtable on Stay Ahead of Tectonic Transformation in BFSI with Scalable Tech Upskilling. And I'm Puja, Bothra, your moderator for this session. We are aware of the transformation taking place in the banking and financial services industry, characterized by a steadfast reliance on futuristic and disruptive technologies to keep pace with changing consumer preferences, preceded by internet banking, fintech solutions, banking software applications, digital payment methods, and many more. The industry has conceded that technology development is the only way it can stay ahead in a hyper-competitive marketplace and provide a rock-solid foundation to build superior operational efficiency and consumer satisfaction. To that point, the front runners in the industry have set up scalable IT units, hiring talent from technology backgrounds. The day's issues tech capabilities are evolving faster than the adeptness of the workforce, thus creating a need for continuous focus upskilling and reskilling. This issue is very topical, and I'm delighted to welcome and introduce eminent speakers from this industry to share insights, game plan, and strategy on upskilling and reskilling of new as well as experienced employees. We have with us Amit Vaish, Director HR at Barclays, Nikhileshwar Singh, Director HR NatWest Group India, Paramjit Singh Nayyar, CHRO Bharti EXA General Insurance, Priyadarshi Bhattacharya, Head of HR Swiss Re, Ritesh Malhotra, Business Head Enterprise, Great Learning. I would now like to welcome the audience too. Thank you for being here. The Ask a Question feature is on the right-hand side of your screen. Just type in your queries there. This powerful and knowledgeable panel will be more than happy to take all your questions. And if you miss anything, don't worry. The recording of this webinar will be available on ETHRWorld website for your future reference. At the start, we would like to understand the changing landscape of BFSI and the transformations taking place in this industry. Amit, could you help us articulate that and share your perspective on the disruptors of this industry and how this industry is evolving?
Sure, Puja. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everyone who's joined us today on this live webcast. Greetings to all of you, wherever you are. Very happy to be on this panel today with my fellow co-panelists to collectively deliberate on a topic which I think is pretty much front and center of most talent agendas in financial services institutions, I would assume. It certainly is in banking where some of us come from. So why is this so important? Why should we be thinking about scalable tech upskilling? If you just take a couple of steps back and think about some of the broader shifts in the banking landscape over the last couple of years, I think it's abundantly clear that technology has already played a major role and will continue to play a major role in redefining how banking services are both delivered and consumed. And the rapid adoption of, I think, digital technology in the recent past has not only challenged banks to redefine and rethink of how and where they engage with their customers at the front end, but also how they innovate to come up with these products and services that they offer to customers at the back end. So I think and in order to remain competitive, right, all of it is in an effort to constantly remain ahead of their competition. And when you talk about competition, I think today competition for banks comes not only from their traditional banking peers, but more importantly, more significantly from some of the digital disruptors, many of which have actually originated from sectors outside of financial services. But they are actually far more agile, innovative, and nimble than legacy banking institutions, which have been around for several hundred years. I recently heard the founder of India's largest online payments company, quote, he said that, the time that it will take banks to learn technology, players like us will actually master financial services and much more. So which gives you an indication of how serious this threat and challenge is all about. I was talking to the dean of ISB earlier in the day, and he mentioned that it's not just Amazon and the likes in technology, but several other players who are actively waiting to enter financial services and disrupt, the market with their competitive sort of offerings and superior products that will actually deliver customer experience, of a whole different kind. So I think it's quite clear that technology has played a major disruptive role in changing banking across all of its different services, whether it be core banking platforms or customer operations or managing just large volumes of data. Of course, physical infrastructure in a very big way, because the whole role and purpose of branches is actually being redefined. The second major disruptive force, in my view, is the role that regulation has played. As you're aware, this is a heavily regulated industry. Constantly evolving regulation requires that banks realign their operating models, to be fully compliant. And those banks with a significant presence in the UK will recall the SRP, or the Structural Reform Program, of a couple of years back, which actually required banks to completely reorganize the way that they are structured in the UK and internationally, to service their customers. So I think it's not just operating models, but I think complex regulation requires that banks really step up their capabilities in areas of risk management, compliance, fraud prevention, data privacy, and a whole host of other aspects that require regulatory oversight and compliance. And finally, I think it's very important to also recognize the role that the global pandemic has played in transforming the banking landscape, right? While on the one hand, I think the pace of digitization has definitely accelerated, and that's a journey that banks were already on. But at the same time, there are several other trends which are imminently sort of visible. What are some of these? I think the modernization of the entire technology infrastructure, right? And that's where the journey to cloud becomes so important, right? The increasing propensity of customers to demand, engagement through voice channels, through web chats, text chats, and a whole host of other virtual channels, because they can't visit physical branches. So the emergence of newer services like collections as mortgage defaults, etc., go up, or bereavement services, just given the very high mortality rates in many countries around the world, because traditional spending through cards or mortgages or other channels goes down. And finally, I think not to sort of undermine the importance of business continuity management, whether through the bank's own workforce or extended workforce through vendor partners in offshore or onshore locations, right? So that's a lot of change, I've tried to put together in a couple of minutes. But if I just summarize, I think from a workforce standpoint, from a workforce perspective, technology always threw the challenge of relevance, right? But more recently, the pandemic has thrown the challenge of resilience. And I think it is the combination of relevance and resilience that will really determine the shape of reskilling and upskilling strategies going forward. And I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time exploring, multiple dimensions of these interesting aspects as we get further along in the discussion. So that's just some opening thoughts, Puja. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Amit. That was beautifully explained. All the points have been very nicely spoken. I would like to go to Param now. Param, from the insurance sector's point of view, where do you see transformations taking place? What are the drivers and what are the changes?
Sure, Puja. First of all, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for getting me on this panel, these esteemed panelists, and giving me an opportunity to interact with so many professionals who are passionate about HR. Yeah, let me kind of give a little context of the industry. What is this industry that I'm representing? To draw a corollary here, we have smartphones and we have insurance products. Both of them are about 2 decades old now with us. The private sector got opened up for insurance about 2 decades back. As we look at the penetration today, the smartphone penetration is over 90% and the insurance penetration is not even 4%. Yeah, this effectively tells us that for every 96 people out of 100, there is no risk coverage, be it health, be it life, be it assets. This effectively means that if there is any mishap that happens and there are finances needed, the individual has to really take a debt and keep paying it over his lifetime. And this is where the need for disruption comes. A large part of our country's population is financially insecure, and we all need that financial security, and that's where the need of disruption comes in, and need to take a significant shift in terms of how we are embracing technology, and really making sure that the technology is used well to reach out to customers and ensure that they are financially secure. I'll kind of make an attempt to also share how this is manifesting in the way industry is operating today. If you look at last few years, there has been significant shift, significant disruption already in the way it is engaging with its customers. Look at the first piece, which is about customer engagement. The way the industry used to engage with customers in the past, the way it engages with customers now is very, very different. The interactions have become digital. It used to be physical earlier. Now it's pretty much digital. The number of products that were being sold in the past using digital modes were barely 5 to 10%. Today, it has touched 25 to 30%. The second important shift that has happened is data-driven decision making. Now, with technology coming in, there's a whole lot of data available to the insurance sector, which means the shape and form of these transactions are changing. You buy a motor, you buy any asset, and if you have left your digital footprints there, you will soon get an advertisement which is focused to yourself saying, please buy a motor insurance, please buy a health insurance, please buy a life insurance, right? And all this is coming focused on, based on your customer, your habits, your preferences, your demographics, your financials. The third important shift that has happened is assisted purchasing. I'm not sure how many of you realize it, but tech-enabled chatbots, virtual assistants, digital enablers like WhatsApp, all this has slowly and gradually become a part of your sales workforce. It's no more humans who are selling products, right? You have machines selling products to you now. Then this whole Internet of Things, the wearable machines, the wearable watches, and some of these things coming in is throwing so much of data to you, to make sure that when you go out to buy a product, everything is customized and is available to you. Yeah? The last shift that has happened is use-based purchase. Yeah. So in the past, there was only one vanilla product for motor, for example. Now today, you can buy a product which is pay per mile, pay as you go, pay as you drive, right? So that's the kind of shift that this industry is experiencing. And as we look at last few years, digital and tech has played a very, very important role. And that's where the need for us to reskill our talent, because the workforce that operates today, its relevance will only exist if we continuously reskill this talent to make it relevant for future. Yeah. So those are a few thoughts from my side. Puja.
Thank you, Param. Definitely the consumer preferences are changing big time, and that's keeping the entire industry on its toes. Darshi, I would also like to know from you, what is the kind of landscape change you are seeing in your industry? Darshi is here. Looks like he's got
As it often happens on all these calls. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Are you? Okay, great. So thanks for that, Puja. And again, good afternoon to everyone. And I hope everyone is well and staying safe. So I work for an organization called Swiss Re. Swiss Re is, of course, a reinsurance company, and is slightly different. We insure organizations like Param's. So obviously, if Param's landscape is changing as an organization, so is ours, because we need to be able to cater to business needs of organizations like his, or even the organization that Amit works for, Barclays. So I'll talk a little bit about business, and it's not just us; it's a very similar kind of impact in other organizations as well. So more and more, I think the way that technology was being the entire workflow would process, it would be about essentially a front-end business getting a requirement, translating that into something that makes sense for a technology, and then further translates that into something that makes sense for the coders, who are then going to translate that for the testers, and so on and so forth. It's a fairly long chain, the way it kind of translates. So more and more, I think organizations are adapting to an operating model where the business and the technology teams are not necessarily separate. So whether in my current organization or in my previous one, DBS Bank, we had moved into a model called two in a box that essentially operates in a way that the business and technology teams actually have shared KPIs, shared visions, shared budgets, and so on and so forth, which ensures that the final end product is turning out to be completely synced up and is a ready product right at the beginning, right? Which has a correlation to the kind of and the kind of skills which are required in the market. We would have all heard of full stack technology developers. Essentially, a lot. You do not necessarily have separate coders and separate people who are testing it, and then separate people who are running production support. So today, the people who are coding and creating the product are also the ones who are testing it, also the ones who are sustaining the product through its entire life cycle. So the kind of people we're looking for in the market, and not just Westry organizations that we're representing here today, are looking for skill sets that allow our employees to be able to transcend this barrier. So there's a huge change in the way that it operates. And the last that I'll maybe reflect on is, which is very inherent to the very pool from which we hire from, is the genesis of the Indian technology industry. And one of the interesting things is that the Indian industry, almost about 25 years back now, when it's set up, almost 30 years back now, is essentially rooted in technology services, which essentially means I have a client who asks me to do something, I do it, and I return it back. Now, the architecture, more often than not, the primary development of that product still tends to happen in onshore countries. And that's very, very crucial, because some of the pioneers of the Indian tech industry, be it the Infosys or the Wipros of the world, have kind of established that as that operating practice, and global in-house centers have kind of followed suit in that sense. I think that landscape is changing as well. So the kind of individuals that could have earlier existed who could at best repair code does not sustain anymore. So we are looking more and more for people who can code from scratch. And you'd see that transformational shift to the Indian startup industry, whether in the financial services industry or not. And that is bringing about a huge change in the kind of people that we bring into the workforce. Just some initial thoughts on that subject. Over to you, Puja.
Thank you, Darshi. Thank you for that. So I think we've kind of covered every aspect of this particular industry, and looks like everything is changing. You know, the models, the way we hire, the way we skill, and the kind of operational work that happens. Nikhil, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah.
yeah, I think it's been covered. Just to take a more consumer perspective, right? A customer perspective. And we've done some research on it at NatWest, and there's some trends emerging over the last few years from a technology perspective. The first one is personalization. So we generating, billions and billions of terabytes of data, and that data has got to be aggregated to make a decision for the customer. And that's how Param talked about. People are being directed at buying of products and services based on that data. So that's one trend. I call that personalization. The second trend that's emerging is protection and permission. So we as financial services organizations not only have an obligation to use that data in a more ethical fashion, but to protect it, and probably stay ahead of the ones who are trying to steal it, bad guys as you would call, right? So there's that entire element of protection and permission. And third key trend that's emerging is digital and human interface. So we at the tap of a button want to buy range of products and services, and we just want to use one platform. So each of these platforms is becoming more and more self-learning, what you would call artificially intelligent. Now, if you look at these three, and as Amit talked about COVID pandemic, right? So there's external circumstances that is forcing you to adopt technology, which is very different. Now, where do you get a workforce that's ready to change with the change in technology? And technology is always going to change faster than we will be able to catch up to it with. So you can either buy, borrow, build. Borrowing is not an option because that doesn't lead to your long-term organizational capability. Buying, I mean, all of you know how tough it is to find the technology that we're looking for or the resources that we're looking for, probably 10 or 20%. So the only option that you're left with is build this internally. And to build it, you have to reskill it. So that's really the landscape that we're living in.
Thank you, Nikhil. That was very insightful. So now I move to Ritesh. Ritesh, based on your experience with the L&D function at various organizations, across this particular industry. So what's your take on this, transformation-driven skilling gaps?
Sure. Thank you, Puja. So we're noticing, we're in a privileged position. We sit in the midst of a lot of financial institutions, banking, insurance. Plus, we also work closely with companies that are transforming them digitally, right? With IT companies. So we are in that unique privileged position to get a view from both sides. First, let me tell you what the erstwhile demand used to be from financial institutions. Mostly, we would notice demands for management development programs, general management courses, which were more attention oriented. There was demand for at an early level in insurance for salespeople, which is the classic hire and train model that insurance has used for several years. So we used to see demand for that, and we would see some general management demand for early stage relationship managers in banks. That was the traditional lens through which we saw banking and financial services industry demand. But like all your panelists said, their business is changing and their consumers' interface with banks and financial institutions is changing. And therefore, over the last 2 years, 1.5 years particularly, we've seen a shift to the digital side in terms of talent demand and upskilling demand. So first, this whole area of data and analytics has become huge. Right now, when I look at that space, I essentially look at two skills. One is the ability to work with large data sets, which is more statistics in orientation or more data science in orientation. And the other is drawing meaningful business conclusions out of that, which is more how do you use effective tools and machine learning algorithms, etc., to make smarter decisions for your consumers and for the institution. So we're seeing a tremendous amount of demand in that area, and particularly, anything to do with big data, AI, machine learning, data sciences. We see all banks and financial institutions building centers of excellence around that. And so they work with us closely in terms of skilling people as well as sometimes hiring skilled people that have gone through our programs. Now, I want to just say that, it's not that these individuals merely do this from a certification point of view. There is a very heavy emphasis on how this knowledge is going to be used in day-to-day business. And I just pulled out some stats this morning, which I'm referring to now. This is the extent of some of the work that was done as part of these programs. Learners from 4 large banks that we work with did projects on Nifty index prediction based on machine learning algorithms that were taught as part of our program. This was done during the pandemic time. So how is Nifty going to move as the markets as well as the other parameters of macroeconomic parameters move? There was a project that was done on predicting sovereign risk rating for countries, and that was taught as part of our program. That project. So this was more economics in nature, and there was one project done on loan default predictions as to how will the pandemic and people's loss of jobs, etc., impact their loan default ratings as well as their ability to pay back. There was a project that was done on what's the sentiment analysis for consumers who've been made several offers by banks, whether it's about cards or whether it's about new loans or whether it's about opening new bank accounts. What's the sentiment analysis on that? So so there is quite a bit of focus demand on job-oriented skills around data is what we are observing, and that is no different to what your other panelists are also saying. Their business is clearly changing. Digital is the way to go forward. Their consumers are demanding it, and therefore they have to absolutely skill themselves and be ready for that change.
Thank you, Ritesh. Yes, we've all established that there is a need for skilling and upskilling employees, and I'm sure you're doing a lot in your organizations. So now I would like to know what are the initiatives you are taking in your organizations to upskill and reskill your employees. So we'll make this very brief because we have a lot of ground to cover, and we'll take audience questions also. In fact, I'm thinking before we talk about our initiatives which we've taken in the organization, I'll just quickly take one very interesting question has come from the audience first, and then we'll talk about that. Given the tech-led transformation happening in the BFSI space, what is a role that functional subject matter expert can play in the journey, and what skill sets do they need to develop to stay relevant?
I'm happy to take a shot at that, Puja, and then maybe pass it around. I think it's a great question, and something that most organizations that I'm aware of are actively invested in. Right? Because gone are the days when you would hire, let's say, a technology professional, even at a middle level, right? I mean, let's say put aside the fresh talent that you're hiring from colleges or institutions, because understandably, there is an upskilling journey for them, regardless of what roles they're going to play at some point in time later. But even if you were to hire somebody with, let's say, 6 to 8 years of experience, getting to somewhat like a program manager stage, etc. Gone are the days when you would hire generalists, right? You don't need people today who are going to be coordinating, managing, or simply aggregating information, right? You don't need people to be doing that role. You really need subject matter experts across a range of capabilities. I mean, a lot of which has already been covered by Ritesh and Param and the others. Those capabilities could be across several services that the bank offers and related technology skill sets. But the point remains consistent that you do need to have people who have a very high proficiency level in not only understanding the domains from a banking standpoint, because a bank is a very large institution, and some organizations which are 250, 300 years old have a lot of legacy applications that are resident in their tech estate. So to be able to understand the domain, to be able to understand the environment in which you're offering sort of those tech solutions is a very important part of the challenge. The second is, of course, constantly making sure that you have skill sets that are able to deliver better products faster, as we call it, because that will ensure that you are being efficient, you're being productive, you're being resilient in the services that you put out. So all of this demands that you have people who are deeply skilled, highly specialized in their respective skill sets. So they can not only troubleshoot, they can not only problem solve, but they can actually think solutions, from an end customer perspective. I mean, that is the importance of actually having SMEs today. And to give you a very simple example, in a typical sort of software architecture, you had a front, middle, and a rear, back layer, right? And you required multiple folks to actually work at different levels, depending on what your specialization was, whether it was user interface at the front, or it was database management at the back, or something in the middle. Today, a full stack engineer can pretty much cut across all three layers, right? And that's the level of specialization that organizations really value, because you bring a better return on the investment in talent. You bring sharply focused solutions, from a customer and business standpoint. So that's just to underscore the importance of SME orientation.
Thank you, Amit. That was really nicely answered.
Puja, if I can.
Sure. Yeah, somebody wanted to come in with a follow-up.
Puja, if I can just maybe get a quick point in over here.
One of the very
interesting things.
Yeah, go on, Darshi.
Puja, that's me, Darshi here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so what I just wanted to kind of highlight over here, one of the interesting things that organizations are facing today when it even comes to recruiting in this workspace, especially from a subject matter expertise perspective, is for a technology role as a bank. And again, I'm thinking as a banker, just from a banking organization perspective, where I was 6 months back, and I have role at a leadership level. Should I be hiring someone from Microsoft or an Amazon or an Adobe, or should I be hiring or right? So what am I giving more importance to? Am I giving more importance to the domain subject matter expertise, or am I giving more importance to the technology subject matter expertise? And I'm leaving a very controversial statement out there. Take it as you will. My experience has been that it's easier to teach a technology guy banking or insurance than it is to teach a banking guy technology, especially the kind of technology that we are talking about today and the rapid pace at which technology is changing right now. So again, giving an example of my previous organization, the head of our consumer banking tech setup, the head of our markets technology gang was actually an ex-Expedia guy, nothing to do with banking at all. And we actually spent more time teaching the nitty-gritties of banking and found it to be an easier skill development to bridge than the other way around. Traditional banking background, technology person, of course, and then trying to bring them up to speed with latest new age technology skills out there. So I'll just leave that controversial thought out there for you.
No, I want to second that. In 30 seconds, Puja, if you allow. See, like I said, we work with both financial institutions as well as with IT organizations, right? And interestingly enough, the IT organizations, when they support the BFSI vertical, they want their IT engineers and technocrats to be aware of banking so that they can have a better dialogue with their customers, right? And at the same time, on the banking side, they want people to be aware of technology. So we have this interesting view of training both. And I agree with Darshi. It's easier to teach banking to technocrats than it's to teach technology to bankers. So, I totally second that. And for that reason, I think we've also seen an increase in the number of people from financial services coming to us, hiring, looking for skilled technocrats who go through our consumer programs all the time. And that talent pool is available for banks to hire.
Thank you, Ritesh. Nikhil and Param, would you want to share something on this, or should we go to talking about the initiatives you are doing in your organization?
I think pretty much summed up, right? So Amit talked about building deep technical expertise, and full stack engineer. I think, and then we worked for organizations where I think the need of the hour is techno-functional, and I agree it's easier to teach banking to a technology guy, but you need both. Standalone engineer today, to me, is not as useful as the one with a banking or a domain expertise. So those are my thoughts.
No, I think I largely agree with the views made here, Puja. Techno-commercial skills is what we need far more. And separately, I wanted to make another point. So on one side, you have functional expertise, the SME skills, right? They have been important in the past and they will continue to be important in future also. But on the top of it, you have a few very important skills that have come up, right? Digital savviness or the tech savviness and the data analytics, right? Now, for us as an organization, we believe this is something that is needed across the functions, across the band levels. Be it a vice president in the company or executive in the company, both of them need to be very savvy with the digital. They need to be very savvy with the technologies that we are using, right? So our attempt is to really make sure that some part of skilling we need to impart in these two areas across the organization, be it any band, be it any function, be it any domain. Yeah, that's how we look at it.
Thank you, Param. So, Amit, can you quickly tell us that how are you helping your SME employees, subject matter expert employees, develop technology skills? What kind of programs are you running for them in your organization? Amit, are you muted? Okay, we'll come back to Amit. Darshi, maybe you can talk about that. What are you doing? How are you doing it in your organization?
Yeah, sure. So I think instant gratification is the need of the hour. So what I mean by that, we're dealing with a generation that's used to getting the entire 12 episodes of Game of Thrones in one go. They don't necessarily want to wait for it, and hence, hence the way that we want to upskill our employees quite often is dictated at the pace that they want to employ themselves. Hence, in my experience, what's worked well for us is to provide a lot of digital learning solutions, especially which are mobile ready, so that employees can use it at a time and go through the things that are relevant to them, that we are as an organization able to outline for them as key skills that they need to develop on. So we are partnered with multiple online platforms, be it O'Reilly or Pluralsight or LinkedIn Learning, so on and so forth. The usual suspects of the tech learning platforms, and we're allowing our staff to kind of follow their own career paths, especially on the learning side. That seems to work fairly well with us, but of course with a little bit of a background of structured learning in terms of what is specific to that role or that individual's role. I think that seems to be working well for us.
Thank you, Darshi. Nikhil, you would want to cover that?
Yeah.
How are you doing it in your organization?
Thank you, Puja. So quite a few things, right? Internal learning platforms and collaboration with digital learning platforms is one way of addressing that, and we'll continue to do it. I think the other key focus that we have is to how do I make people aware of the latest trend in banking industry, because more often, because of the fact that they continue to work in their own technology space, they miss out on the bigger picture as to what's their development happening. So a lot of tie-ups and collaborations there to help them be aware of what's happening. Some workshops that we do a lot of web chats, etc., within our organization, getting experts from outside to talk about it. And one of the things that's been helping a lot is a lot of industry connects and interfaces. So how do we partner with organizations like NASSCOM to understand what they're looking for? How's the industry shaping up? Working with institutions like IITs to co-author and co-create papers, a lot of white papers, etc. So those have been helpful, and at least they're building awareness within organizations, and it helps them map sort of consumer journey to understand where are we and what gaps need to be bridged. The other bit that's happening globally is tie up with organizations like Microsoft, or you would have heard of this company called DreamQuarks. They are the next generation AI analytics developers. So they help us create that awareness and build skills that we need from a future set perspective. Now, I think the focus largely remains how do we create a multi-skilled, agile workforce that's ready with skills of future. Are we always ready? Probably no. And that's a gap that we're all trying to bridge.
The only piece, Puja, I would add, the only piece I would add in addition to all that's been said is I have seen a lot of organizations do this quite well, which is to really, put your your target talent segment, the one you really want to upskill, to sort of partner with startups, and that actually works very, very well. So in addition to all of the, classroom learning, the open source learning, which you have, enough and more already. I mean, there is nothing like actually working with a group of people who are tasked to actually address a problem, right? And the problem statement could be in terms of incubating a new capability. It could be finding a solution for a customer's problem, or it could be something else, right? Coming up with a novel idea that could actually take scale, in a matter of time. And I think that sort of learning, not only that experience not only accelerates your learning, it actually comes out with very solid proof of concepts that find application, to those learnings as well. So I think not to underestimate the value in partnering with some of these players that are already trying to figure it out there, and they do it much faster, much cheaper, much better than large organizations which sort of go through a very structured and evolved process, which sometimes can take longer.
Thank you, Amit.
Yeah.
So Ritesh.
I have a view on
that I can add on.
Yes, Darshi, go on.
Ritesh, please go ahead. I'll recap later.
I was just going to say that I agree with Amit. skilling people on these new age areas requires class leading curriculums, requires a lot of good quality content. It requires academicians with the right experience and the right pedigree. It also requires enough number of technocrats, because all of these courses and programs that you want to skill people on are basically a combination of business as well as technology, right? And so companies like us, and you talked about startups, companies like us have invested heavily in both areas. So a lot of our academicians are people who come with financial services backgrounds. A lot of them have their research work that's happening in the financial services and the economics in the space. And plus we have a lot of academicians who are technocrats, right? Plus there are these investments in content, technology, platform. How do you engage learners more? Nikhil talked about shortest attention spans, and they want to grab everything quickly. So that requires exciting UX to be built so that people are deeply engaged. So now, how does a company do it all together? Now their business is finance, their business is not teaching. So which is where I think I completely agree with the point that Amit made, that there are these organizations like us who've gone ahead and spent time over the last 6 years painfully. We worked hard to build this expertise, and that's available on tap. So for us to start off on a skilling program, it's a matter of a week, within which we can basically take all the learners with us and start educating them and train them in a matter as quickly as sometimes 9 weeks, sometimes 12 weeks to 16 weeks, and obviously longer duration programs also. But I totally buy that point, and we see that the maturity of organizations shifting in that sense, or increasing the acceptance of edtech or of companies like us playing the role that their erstwhile L&D departments would play. We also see that maturity and that acceptance increasing.
Thank you, Ritesh. Ritesh, on that point, there is an audience question which relates to what you just said. So here somebody wants to know that the general management programs that you have, management development programs, can that be contextualized for a specific industry at Great Learning?
Yeah, of course they can be. So some of our general management programs, when we talk to financial services industry, they will always have their own requirements in terms of use cases and projects and case studies that are of a certain nature or kind. The examples that I gave early on, which were about some of the projects that were done as part of our programs, including the Nifty index predictor, or whether it was predicting the sovereign rating of nations. All of these were projects that were requested by our customers, and they were baked into our standard programs. Right. So of course there is the flexibility of tweaking these programs to suit an organization. Let's say a large company wants to develop a pool of data scientists that are going to work on economic data, and based on that come up with products that are relevant for for a bank. So all of these projects can be tweaked as per the company's requirements. The fundamental program is available. The layering on top, of course, is tweaked for an organization and the industry and their need.
Thank you, Ritesh. Before we discuss the next point, Param, is there anything you want to add to this?
Sure, Puja. Our experience on reskilling has largely been around setting up an internal tool, because we believe things cannot be pushed when it comes to reskilling, right? You need to create platforms which are very pull-based, and we realize that the attention span of our people is very less, right? People do not really want to sit in a classroom for 8 hours, 9 hours. They do not want to be on a laptop for 2-3 hours. They need bite-sized learning, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, at the most 30 minutes. They want a gamified, immersive experience. So what we did is we picked up a lot of content for the areas where we felt there is a need for us to get people reskilled. All that content is now available on an online platform, which is available on mobile. On a click of a button, you just press the screen there and you can get into the module that you really want to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes on. There are leaderboards available. You can compete with your colleagues. You can get your certifications. Just go through the course, maybe 10 sessions of 20 minutes each, and get your certification. Once you get the certification, you have all those updates going to your colleagues. And we really tried to make it very interesting, very engaging, and very immersive. And we felt that really worked well for our people. We saw a lot of success there.
Thank you, Param. So it is very interesting to see the large amount of work that is being done in these organizations to develop skills, both technical as well as banking and subject matter skills. So now we wonder and we want to know like what kind of value back do you create when when you come up with these initiatives of learning. So what is the business case of learning initiatives that you are, putting forward in your organization? So a little, tricky thing, but that's a reality. So let's go over to Nikhil. You want to start?
Thank you, Puja. And very interesting one, right? Because as HR folks, we always challenge with how do you justify learning and how do you quantify it, right? I think three things. As long as you're able to justify to your business that customer experience is getting impacted, right? So you have to keep customers at the forefront of everything. And most of us from banking organizations, know that the customers have to be at the forefront, right? So as long as you're able to justify that customer experience is getting impacted. Second bit is operational efficiency is getting better. And thirdly, your employee productivity and employee engagement is increasing, your business case would generally, find a lot of support. Let me give you an example. You want to create a business case for reskilling your workforce on big data, and that's out there. Now, as if you have to sort of go ahead and put that business case out there, if you look at it from customer experience perspective, you have to call out the benefits that it provides. It provides more rounded view of the customer, and hence product, services, and experience is much better. Operational efficiency, yes, it gets impacted because you're able to create predictive analytics, you're able to build your risk systems better, you're able to create your entire security mechanisms much better. So that second question is addressed. And thirdly, it's quite imperative that it enhances employee productivity, interdepartmental efficiencies increase. So and most importantly, your employees feel that they've been trained on a skill that's much more employable and cutting edge. So employee engagement gets impacted. Now the question is, for each of these you have to start quantifying and assigning, because business will look for a dollar value. So the business case exists. It's for us to sort of put it all together, quantify it, and present it. And this normally happens when you're able to sort of put a lot more structure to the entire piece.
Thank you, Nikhil, for that. Amit, over to you.
Sure, Puja. I think it's a good question, like Nikki said, and an interesting one, because very often in trying to articulate the business case, we over-index on the financials, right? I mean, that is probably an easier kill, right? How much will it cost, and how much will it be a staggered investment over a period of time, and so on and so forth. So you tend to generally over-index on the financials, but what you end up doing in the process is possibly underestimating some of the more intangible benefits which are apparent, right? Things like what impact will it have on employee engagement, your ability to retain talent, your ability to just go out and attract quality talent on the back of investments that you're making in growing your skill bases, and just the overall multiplier impact it has on the employer brand, which is so important to sort of strengthen in a competitive talent landscape like we have in the country today. So I think these are all inputs and drivers to just make your business case more holistic and present the complete picture when you sort of go about embarking on this upskilling journey for a large workforce, right? Also, I have found that in global companies, particularly in global firms, you can play the location strategy very, very well, right? You can play the location strategy option to actually your advantage. So if you just do a mapping of what are your build and buy options, and whether you do that onshore or offshore, and then evaluate the pros and cons of doing each, it can give you a very different dimension of the entire learning, and not only learning but also hiring strategy, right? So should I be investing in hiring skills onshore, or should I be actually upskilling my workforce or training them back in India or Southeast Asia or wherever else, right? And there are clearly pros and cons of doing each. So while you can attract talent in large numbers out here and good engineering talent, what they will miss is generally an appreciation of the customers, right? And sometimes being the median age that you have typically in India, the experience level, they don't always have the tip of the iceberg skills, right? The very, very cutting edge skills that you really need to engineer product development, right? So how do you then complement that with, a deeper skill set in some other part of the world? How do you develop customer appreciation that you don't necessarily have in the workforce because they are 2 or 3 steps removed from the end customer? I think these are all important as you sort of try to come up with a holistic strategy for learning or upskilling or reskilling a large global workforce.
Thank you, Amit. And actually, this also relates to one question that we've received. And the question is that how lucrative will India remain as an offshore center for some of these legacy BFSI companies and organizations? So can you take that?
Yes. Again, obviously, that question is coming out of some sense of gradually and progressively sensing that the arbitrage opportunity is actually starting to sort of recede, right? And which is a reality. If you look at the kind of premium that there's any difference with their counterparts in some other part of the world. So I don't think my experience has been that probably at the more junior level there still continues to be a catch up between India and elsewhere, and at least for some time that arbitrage opportunity will stay. But middle level and definitely at the most senior levels, that arbitrage is probably much narrower than it was even 5 years back. In some cases you may actually be at par or maybe slightly ahead of markets elsewhere. So it can't be just a game of comparing dollars and cents. It has to be about justifying the value of the investments that you're making in such expensive talent out there. So and that is pretty much how your CFOs and others will tend to take a look, regardless of which country you will be hiring talent, whether India or somewhere else. So I think it is at the lower levels their volume is concentrated. You may still enjoy that for some more time, but middle to senior levels where talent is getting scarcer, the arbitrage opportunities are decreasing. I think you will find yourself at the losing end if it's only a cost play that you're driving and not a value play.
Thank you, Amit. That was very insightful.
And to add to that, Puja,
yes.
One is cost arbitrage, and like Amit said, cost arbitrage is gradually eroding at senior levels, and that's where you will need to sort of start playing the value and velocity game. I'm adding velocity because a lot of times when you have requirements, it's the offshore center that comes up with that velocity to deliver. I'll give you an example. When the pandemic was raging through the world, and most MSMEs businesses were suffering, there was a need to support the businesses. And Amit would know, government of UK announced bounce back loans, they call BBLs, and there was an ask from banks like ours to go ahead and advance those loans at a very, very stretched timeline. And that's where we stepped in, and a lot of our offshore guys got together to advance those loans at a breakneck speed, right? So while there was a technology platform that was available, offshore played a key role in sort of coming together and advancing those billions of pounds of loans, and all virtually. So the value and velocity does play a role beyond the cost arbitrage that we're talking about. And the next generation of offshoring work that will happen will demand more and more of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nikhil, for sharing that anecdote. Very insightful. Darshi, I would like to go to you now regarding the business case question and how do you create value?
Thanks, Puja. I don't think I can articulate it that I already have. But I think there is a little elephant in the room, which is what Amit already spoke about, the build versus buy debate. So as an organization, is it easier to retrench and hire fresh skills in the direction that you as an organization want to move towards? Or do you want to spend internally to kind of upskill your resources to meet the future demands? I think in the end, and this differs from company to company, of course, there are enough examples that won't name them, but enough examples of organizations that are taking the former route. However, I think in the end it comes down to what's your employee value proposition. What do you want to be known for? What kind of an organization do you want to be remembered as? Why should an employee come and work for you if there is a constant fear that you're constantly chopping and changing and restructuring and coming up with innovative ways to kind of think all the time, that makes employees very, very jittery all the time. And I think Nikhil already spoke about that in terms of how it impacts employee engagement. Are you going to have a productive workforce as a result? Yeah. So I think from that perspective, it's a no-brainer. And in my experience, I've generally found especially in the BFSI industry, I'm finding more and more business leaders and organizations being very aligned on this aspect. And I'm finding the role of HR having to mediate and sell the need for upskilling reducing a bit. I think the understanding is already there, and quite often these are now coming in as organizational imperatives, especially in organizations that have very clear employee value propositions about who they are and what they want to be renowned for. So I think the business case is a no-brainer. It just depends on the organization and what do you believe in. It's a tricky one though.
Thank you, Darshi. Param, I'm going to move to you with that question, and there is an audience question also for you. Where they are asking, how is the role of a relationship manager transforming in your particular industry? So
okay, so let me both. Yeah. See, on the first question of business case, I think the much has already been elaborated. I'll kind of emphasize further on what she just mentioned. It's all about what do you want to pick between build and buy. When the need for reskilling is already established, then it's only about defining the right approach. And when it comes to very large scale organizations, buy is not really the option that you can have. It's only the build that is the option that you have, because you really can't suddenly buy for such a large scale organization. You are left with only one strategy, which is build. Yeah. The second is the whole lot of impact on employee engagement that Amit spoke about, and I'll kind of further that conversation to say it's employee engagement as well as employer branding. How do you want your organization to be seen? Is this the organization which is really investing in developing people, or it says, okay, you have become redundant and we no more need you and we'll have fresh talent coming in? So I think it goes down to say, what is your people strategy and how do you want your organization's employer brand to be projected? Yeah. Coming to the audience question on how is the relationship manager's role changing? Look, I spoke about the fact that there's a lot changing in this industry. The way we used to do customer acquisition process has significantly changed. It used to be seen as a consultative process. Yeah? You have to engage with a customer, do a warm conversation, then slowly and gradually help him understand, realize the need to have a financial risk cover. Now, this over a period of time has changed. Now people want choice, people want freedom. They no more want to do what somebody else is telling them to do. They want simple products that can be understood by them, products which give them an option to decide, do I want to have a short-term cover, a medium-term cover, a long-term cover, and do I want a pay-per-use cover or do I want a vanilla cover, right? And hence, relationship manager has a very important role to play. Now, that role is not about doing 10 conversations. Now, that role is about making individual feel empowered and only providing him support where he needs it. Right, so it's no more about it's my captive customer. It's about, okay, you can decide what you want, and I'm available to you as one unbiased, fair, data-driven party, data-driven sales professional who will provide you whatever insight that you need. Yeah, and that's where the relationship manager's role ends. It's no more about really sitting with the customer a few times.
Thank you. We just have 2 minutes. I'll quickly take one question, which is. The audience wants to know which are the tech courses, which are the most popular courses in the banking industry. Ritesh, you would like to take that?
Yeah, I think I already answered that. Mostly we are saying, we see pockets of demand around full stack. We see pockets of demand around cybersecurity, around DevOps, but these are all going to be very captive units. Larger demand that you're seeing is around the data programs, which I feel is on the cusp of technology and data. That's where we see the larger demand. But I have a comment on the last question that you asked, which is a little business case.
Sure.
And I wish we had the secret sauce, because then we could make business cases for all our potential customers and do roaring business with them. So we don't have a clear answer to it. However, some of the thoughts were quite interesting, and I particularly like Amit's thoughts on the, it's that word cost arbitrage. In my opinion, that word has to, now be flushed away, and it has to be replaced by value arbitrage. And value arbitrage certainly exists in the favor of India, I believe. Especially with the amount of time that people are willing to invest in upskilling themselves, plus the general focus on education, the programs available. I think if we invest, and these organizations invest heavily in upskilling their people, then they certainly go up on the value chain, and that's one way to just end that debate. I would love to see us not be referred to as a cost arbitrage industry at all, country at all. In fact, the IT industry is also moving in that direction. I've spent considerable amount of time in that industry, so they're also going through the same change. I think it's going to be all about value arbitrage and not cost arbitrage, and I have no doubt that battle we are going to win as a country.
Thank you, Ritesh. Any other closing points anybody would like to say here?
Just a very quick submission, Puja. I think we spent a lot of time over the course of this fascinating, discussion on trying to explore hard skills, right? The technology skills, which is understandably, I think, the focus of this discussion. But what I'd also like to say, and that is a learning for banks certainly out of the pandemic, is that it's not just about the hard skills, right? Which is going to be the differentiator in the future, and that will understandably require your workforce to be reskilled. I mean, today's banking is all about purpose-driven banking, right? And there is a range of opportunity today. Banks as being very central players in trying to resurrect the economies of most countries which have been battered by the pandemic. I think banks are increasingly being looked upon as central players who will make financing available, who will make liquidity available, who will make social connects happen where people are really struggling, for a variety of reasons as an outcome of the pandemic. So I think purpose-driven banking, the whole space of ESG, right, environmental, social, and governance standards, climate change, being far more empathetic, far more appreciative of, I think, societal changes that are happening, and being more responsible, I think, for customers and extended communities. All of these also require a very, very different mindset, right, for large institutions to be ready to embrace, and that has got to necessarily flow down into the workforce and the type of upskilling program that you run. So it's not just about the hard skills alone, but I think and a combination of other skills that will make financial services more responsible players in the landscape.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for bringing about that point on sustainability and empathy. How much ever the reality is about BFSI and, the competition and technology, but these factors will continue to play a key role and shape the professional lives of its employees. So with this, we draw the curtain to this panel discussion. Thank you, panelists, for giving out time. Thank you, panelists, for your great insights covering this entire topic in its 360 degrees. I'm sure it was very insightful for the audience as well. Thank you from the ETHRWorld and great learning as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.